All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I really want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. My name's Alex O'Hanlon. I'm One Omaha's engagement manager. We're really excited to welcome you to our second installment of the From the Ground Up speaker series. From the Ground Up explores the most pressing issues Omahans face from a different angle, bringing in both content experts and neighborhood organizers to share their success stories and strategies. Our focus for 2024 is environmental justice. So in this series, we will cover the definition and history of environmental justice, how environmental justice issues will factor into upcoming city plans, what residents can do to advocate for strong environmental justice policies, and what residents can do to build coalitions to address environmental justice issues in their neighborhoods. So last month, we covered the context, history, and definition of environmental justice, which we will also be going over tonight. And tonight, we're going to speak with city planners and urban designers to get an understanding of how environmental justice principles are factoring into future planning in our city. On October 29th, we're going to have the last in this series, and we'll be hearing from neighborhood organizers about environmental justice projects that they're working on here in Omaha. And speaking of neighborhood organizing, the One Omaha mini grant applications will be opening soon. The One Omaha mini grant is for neighborhood groups working in Omaha looking to create change. Awards are for up to $1,000. Applications open on October 1st and close on October 31st. Grants will be awarded in early December, and awardees have up to 10 months to implement their project. To learn more about the mini grant or to register for the next event, you can check out our social media pages or go to oneomaha.org. So real quickly before we begin, I just have a few housekeeping items. Please silence your phones and other electronics. Save all the questions for the Q&A that we're going to have at the end of the discussion. And the emergency exits are directly behind you through the lobby or located to your left. So that being said, I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Kimara Snipes, One Omaha's executive director. Kimara has organized in East Omaha communities since she was a teenager and has continued that work through her involvement with East Omaha neighborhood associations and by serving as president of the South Omaha Neighborhood Alliance. Okay, Kimara, take it away.
Thank you, Alex. And give it up for Alex, who's been working really, really hard on this speaker series. So hello, everyone. I'm extremely excited to be here with you tonight. Our panelists, and by the way, we got a squad up here. I'm just saying. Our panelists tonight are Lynsey, Byers, and please hold your applause until after I tell you all about them, Robert Laroco and Kene, Okigbo. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them. So Lynsey is an Omaha native with family roots in the North Omaha and Florence area. She had a rewarding 18-year career at PayPal, where she was able to learn and expand her skills in product and portfolio management. She most recently managed strategic planning operations for the company, where she brought collaboration, trust, and transparency. I'm going to say that again. Collaboration, trust, and transparency to the planning process. Her desire to be more connected to the purpose and mission in her work led her to leave PayPal in 2021 and go all in on city planning. She is currently completing her master's in community and regional planning at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and has a graduate certificate in public management from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. In November of 2023, she joined the City of Omaha's Planning Department as one of 3 city planners tasked with delivering a new comprehensive plan to Omaha. We also have Robert Laroco, who has been a city planner with the City of Omaha Planning Department since 2017. He works in environmental and resilience planning in the Long Range Division and leads a team as project manager for the development of the city's Climate Action and Resiliency Plan. Prior to this, he served for many years as the city's floodplain manager and planning board administrator. Robert began his career as a city planner on staff in Rapid City, South Dakota, where his commitment to environmental action was reinforced over 7 years of working and living in the Black Hills. Before his time in the Hills, Robert was a graduate fellow at the University of Iowa, where he earned his Master of Science in Urban and Regional Planning. Robert met his wife, Lorraine, as an undergraduate in Sioux City, Iowa. They have 2 daughters, Winifred and Sylvia, and when Robert isn't pursuing transformational environmental action, he is typically found escorting the girls to soccer events. And finally, last but definitely not least, we have Kene Okigbo. He is a licensed landscape architect in RDG Planning and Design's Urban Design and Planning Studio. He graduated from North Dakota State University, earning his Bachelor of Landscape Architecture and Bachelor of Science in Environmental Design. He considers design of the public realm a responsibility that is equally heavy and awesome, and he values the lessons shared by his industry peers. Kene imagines new mediums through which innovative voices in landscape architecture can be amplified and is fascinated by emerging project topologies that can offer solutions to pervasive global and societal issues. He and his work have been recognized with numerous awards, and he is a frequent speaker at universities and conferences across the country. Please help me welcome Lynsey, Robert, and Kene, and thank them for being here. Before we get started, I want to thank Conservation Nebraska and We Make Omaha for setting up tables to engage with all of our audience. Hopefully you had a chance to visit their table in the back. Thank you for your hard work that you do in the city and for being here tonight. And also, we can't forget to thank the amazing Benson Theater for hosting us here this evening. Let's give them all a round of applause as well. Okay, so we got a lot to talk about. Let's go ahead and get started. Robert, can you give us a history of climate action plans in the city of Omaha?
Sure. Thank you
Absolutely.
For inviting me here this evening. I should start off with that. So the history of climate action in the city, unfortunately, probably isn't as deep or as long as we would prefer that it would be. The primary document that the city had crafted back in the early 2000s was the City of Omaha Master Plan. It's kind of a guiding document that city planners use and we should note also that this is what Lynsey is working on, the replacement for the City of Omaha Master Plan. But that master plan consisted of a bunch of different elements, and each of them was specific to a single topic. Like, so for instance, there was one about housing, and there was one about transportation, and there was one about the environment. And that today serves as the primary guiding document for environmental action in the City of Omaha. I think that was 2007. I think I see David out there. He probably knows exactly when that was written. Besides that, though, there have been many different documents that touched on little bits and pieces of environmental action or climate action or just conservation principles, those types of things. And you'll also find in the variety of different documents, again, related to things like transportation or future land use or another one.
Yeah, built form.
Built form, that's a great example. They touch on the environment, but nothing ever really specifically focused on the environment. So it was acknowledged that the environment or environmental concerns were something that needed to be addressed, but it was never specifically addressed in its own thing. So that is what we have for a climate action plan that has existed in the past. It's about 20 years old, and we're in the process now of developing, some would say an update, some would say a replacement for, supplement for that existing environmental element. There's a lot of pieces of the new climate action plan that are similar to what was existing before. They mirror the same things, but it is a new plan. Yes.
So at one point in time, there was an Office of Climate Action. What happened to that?
That was disbanded. And I was trying to find this information today, and I couldn't find a resource that told me when the office was dissolved. So maybe somebody can has that information. But yeah, it was determined that for financial reasons, for budgetary reasons, for political reasons, the office was considered to be unnecessary to operations, and it was disbanded.
So thank you for answering that. We know now, so the city has chosen to create the plan. What can it achieve, or especially thinking about the former master plan, the environmental element of that? What can this new plan achieve?
I think that it's important to honor the efforts that have been done by people before in the community. So the environmental element is a critical document that should be heavily referenced. It should be remembered and looked at as a benchmark for what we were trying to do back in, say, 2007. But there were some limitations to that document. Primarily, the big one was that there was no strategy, there was no effort put forth into the implementation of any of those items. As we craft this climate action resiliency plan, one of the elements that was identified as being critical through our public engagement process, one that was identified as critical to internal staff when we sent out the request for proposals to have this done, was that we need to see an implementation strategy down on paper that needs to be adopted as a part of the plan that we can then go out and do after the adoption of the plan. So I'd say that's the primary thing. And then it is important that we stay up to date on this. The material, the information, the data that we had is 20 years old. And these are living documents, and they have to be updated regularly. They have to be considered. The strengths and weaknesses have to be weighed carefully, and some things have to go. Some things need to be reconsidered in a new way.
And then one more question about that. What is the timeline for the climate action plan? Like, when did it start, and what point are we at right now?
So we've been going for about a year now. It's when I took over as project manager for this. We're working with a company out of Minneapolis called Pale Blue Dot as consultants, and as well as HDR here in town. Sorry, Kenny. But so we're about a year in, and we are in the final drafting stages right now. The last year has been heavy on public engagement. It's been heavy on working with our planning teams, what we've decided to call them, to kind of draft and craft this message, this plan. And we're hoping to have this go before the planning board in November this year. And city council would be, there's different requirements for how many times an item has to go before city council and how many times it has to be heard and when it's voted on. But we are expecting that it would be voted on before the end of this year.
No, go ahead. Do you want to add?
Ooh, okay.
It works.
It works. No, I just wanted to respond to one thing. So, Robert, you'd mentioned the response to engagement efforts and what you'd heard from community members, specifically referencing the implementation section. I was one of those community members that was like, hey, it makes it a lot easier for, in my job, me to pick up the plan and advocate to a client or to whoever. These are initiatives that we should include in our built efforts when they're reflected and implementation is thought on the forefront. So just huge appreciation from everybody that's on the design, planning, construction side of things for, it's massive.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that.
I appreciate that, yeah.
Okay. We are going to shift a little bit, Lynsey, and talk about the comprehensive plan. Can you talk about the history of comprehensive plans in Omaha?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not lying when I say I would love to, because I am a little bit geeky about it. As you mentioned, when I left my career at PayPal, I went and actually I had to finish my undergrad. I finished that at UNO, and I remember sitting in a sustainability class and discovering that Omaha had a master plan, because I was searching for it, and it said that it was written in 1997, and I thought, surely there's a newer one, and I couldn't find it. Lucky me, 2 years later, there was the opportunity to take the job to help produce a new one. The history of planning in Omaha is relatively short, which is probably good for this conversation. In the 20s, the city of Omaha was actually one of the first cities to implement zoning regulations, which is a really big deal if you think about what cities and development looked like in the 20s. Important for preserving, public health, safety, welfare. That's really what zoning regulations set out to do. But there wasn't a broader plan for Omaha beyond that. In 1954, the city charter was created that put in place a planning department in the city of Omaha. And our boss actually found in the basement of the Civic Center, we've got storage, from decades and decades and decades ago. We found an old 35 millimeter film that the planning department had produced a little movie where they were trying to convince the residents of Omaha to pass this new master plan. I know, right? I think we should put it out there for everyone to watch. Would you be surprised that in the 50s, the primary topic of conversation was automobiles? We need more roads to get these cars around. So that was really a big time for city planning. And then again in the 90s, that's when we had the master plan that was put together. If you think about what the 90s were like for us, this is the emerging of the internet, technologies like that. We were writing the plan in the 90s with data from the 80s. We did it with the best of our abilities. And what we know today is that the best cities have comprehensive plans, and yes, they're for a long-term vision, but you go in and you update them regularly. That's something that Omaha has not done historically, but as part of this process, we will start doing as well. So hopefully our conversations of what's the history of planning in Omaha will be a lot more rich in the future.
And what's the timeline for the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, so we officially launched it with the public by launching our website in June. WeMakeOmaha.org or .gov, both will get you there. We have a booth at the front, grab some stickers. But it's community engagement. At the forefront, community engagement, and all the way to the end, community engagement is what we're doing with this plan. Right now, through the next 18 months, you can expect to see us out doing numerous events, and we can talk about that more. But really, by the end of 2026 is when we hope to also be taking this to council for a vote, with it having been gone through public review prior to that. So it's going to be a pretty intense, 2-year period for us. But things like this that are really big take a lot of work.
Okay. And so can you talk about how plans like the Climate Action Plan and the Comprehensive Plan help to shape and guide future development? How much power do these plans really have?
So they can have power, certainly if we put the right ideas into them and it's something that the community supports and there's will to move it forward. So let's be clear about that. There are a lot of cities that have done really big and maybe outrageous things with their plans. Sometimes they get implemented and sometimes they get stopped in the courts. For example, you might have seen Minneapolis in the news, that one of the things that they did is they said no more single-family zoning. We're not going to allow that in our community when we have an affordable housing crisis and we have equity issues. We need to make more housing available, and there was pushback for it, right? So There is a lot of power that can come from a comprehensive plan. First of all, the state requires that we have one, okay? Any city that wants to say, you can build this here but not there, has to have a comprehensive plan that supports that development. And the city requires us to do this as well. So there is legislative support. It's part of our democratic system that we have to do this. But beyond that, we can have, again, this is us writing down what we think in 20 years Omaha should look like. So this is the time to think of those big, audacious things.
Yeah, and I would say that part of that too is that the process creates a means of binding the community together. The people that are in this room, the people that have attended all these other events, the booths that they've been having, the optics of the process that Lynsey and her team have been crafting for the past several months creates the sense of the community coming together and working towards a single objective. So there was power in that because this process, maybe even this working session and hopefully many more in the future, ingrains itself within you, and you get to say, I was there when we created this plan, and this is the way we need to do it. This is what we agreed upon as a community, and that's incredibly powerful. From the climate action perspective, and I'm sure this would apply for the comprehensive plan too, but the climate action plan is a little bit different in that it also opens us up for the ability to go get money, to go get funding, and to go be able to find the means to implement these things. One of the problems that we've stumbled into during this crafting has been that we had this grant that we got from the EPA. We started crafting a plan, and then they opened it up for another round of funding, and it was a lot of money. So everybody was kind of drooling and looking at this pile of money and going, man, what can we do? What can we go get? And we ended up not getting anything. We submitted an application, and we didn't get it. And the reason was because we didn't have the plan in the first place. The other communities already had a plan, and they just went to their plan, pointed at their page, and said, this is what we want to do. Can we have some money for that, please? And they got it. We didn't. We were not prepared. We were not in a position to be successful. And that's one of the things that this climate action resiliency plan will empower the community to do.
I agree with. Can you hear me? Okay. I agree with everything Robert said. And one of the things that I want to make sure we discuss too is that even though I say, yes, we haven't had a new comprehensive plan since 1997, and I want to be clear, it was called the Master Plan in 1997. That's what we called it. We're intentionally calling it a comprehensive plan going forward because of negative connotations using the term. Just because we haven't done that doesn't mean that plans haven't been created or that important work has not happened. If you watch the news or read many sources, you could have seen that in the last many years we've passed Vision Zero. The active mobility plan has been worked on through this year, the climate action resiliency plan, Connect Go,
Housing
affordability action plan. What the comprehensive plan does is acts as a nice big, I was going to say an umbrella, but let's call it a warm hug. We'll make it nice for tonight. A nice big warm hug around all of those plans and says, I see what you were trying to do. I see what you want. And this is when we talk about housing, we're also going to talk about climate. When we talk about transit, we're also going to talk about housing and economic development because all of these things are related. And how can we package it and put it together in a way that we really do give power to all of those plans? If I do my job well, his job gets easier.
No. I'm going to go get the hood. No.
I know we've been on this question for a while, but it's a big question. And just to contribute my piece, really just amplifying what both of you have said, the heart of the question was, can plans be effective? And the short answer is yes, no. because I think that we've all been a part of planning. I mean, not us, but we know of planners and urban designers that have been a part of plans that have been shelved. They were created with best intentions, but nothing came from them. And I can think of one project in particular where I am doing everything to make sure that somebody uses this thing that we made, because the work is good. Right. But on the other side, there are examples across the country, across the world, of plans that galvanized people and got them to create huge substantive effects for their community. The way that I think of those best examples is, if anyone remembers the Planeteers and Captain Planet. Sure. Yeah, just one person? Only one person? Oh, yeah. Cool, okay, like 5 people, great. There were these 5 kids from across the world, and the only way that they could summon Captain Planet was if they used these rings in unison. And it can't just be planners, it can't just be developers, it can't just be like these silos coming together. When we really beg people to come to engagement efforts, it's not because we're trying to say, hey, 3,000 people responded to this survey. It's because the only way to find the right answer is to talk to the right people and make sure that they're part of the process. And like, you all are Planeteers in this example that's falling apart a little bit, but you see where I'm going with this. Yeah.
No, I really thank you for that. I was writing down in my notes the right ideas, and the rest of that comes with that come from the right people. And so to hear that is music to my ears, and I know I don't speak for everyone, but I assume it's music to your ears as well. And I think that's the reason why people come, even just a speaker series, to hear, as I said earlier, the really real, and to really understand what's really happening. And we appreciate the additional insight. It's powerful information. So I'm all giddy up here. Yay. Okay, so since you have the mic, Kene, let's ask you a question. Can you explain to us what an urban designer does?
No.
Well, show's over, y'all. Let's go. No.
No, I love the question, specifically because there's so many types of urban designers. As you noted, I went to school for landscape architecture, 5-year program at North Dakota State. When I left the program, I really wanted to work in urban environments, but I was also really interested in campuses and parks and recreation, and there are a lot of project typologies within landscape architecture that you can grab onto. But the one thing that I knew was I respect and love those that do this type of work. I just knew that it wasn't for me. Single family residential projects that impact 1 to 5 people, not my cup of tea. But as I had the opportunity of diving deeper into the world of urban design, being able to work on active transportation projects, being able to work on trail projects, being able to work on parks in dense urban communities, being able to think about how people get from home to work, school, church, and how all of those environments not only move you from place to place, but specifically help you live a more fulfilling and a healthier life is huge. A stat that I constantly come back to as it pertains to trails, and trails they're turning into a significant part of the work that I do, and some of the most exciting work that I do. Some people think of trail projects as sidewalks, maybe even just wide sidewalks that move you from your home to your school, but those wide sidewalks are safe routes to schools for children to maneuver their way to and from. Those wide sidewalks, when invested in, I think it's every dollar invested in a trail project is $3 saved in medical expenses. Like, that is massive. When we think about places that are blue zones, or places where individuals find that they are living longer, not only do they have access to exercise and access to healthier foods, but it's the infrastructure that's around them that accommodates them living a healthier life. So not only does urban design impact your ability to live a higher quality life, but it literally impacts the quantity of life that we have if we value it. So that's broadly what urban design is.
But it also makes sense, right? Especially as we think about certain parts of the city that maybe have different life expectancy compared to other parts of the city, and how something like maybe a trail can have an impact on that. You got my brain going up here now. Everyone does. All right.
There's like a 10-year delta between East, specifically North Omaha, and West Omaha in life expectancy.
Absolutely. Exactly what I was thinking about. Okay. So can you talk about how planning and design firms, similar to the one that you work for, how do you interact with and help to implement these plans, the city plans?
Yeah, so that happens in a couple of ways. We were talking about the Housing Affordability Action Plan, and RDG was fortunate enough to be a partner on that project. So sometimes we are direct consultants working with the city to craft this document, this plan that everyone will use moving forward. There are other times where, like, I see a plan on the shelf and I'm looking through the pages for what is most relevant to me, whether we have a project in mind now or there is the potential for a project down the line. It's my job to be the advocate, both on behalf of citizens today, but citizens tomorrow as well, of practices that our client doesn't know that they want yet. And that is the polite way of saying, hey, yeah, I know that you want 30 more stalls of parking spaces, but do you need them, and can we reduce urban heat island effect by making sure that there's more vegetative masses through that space? Is it within the realm of possibility to consider a few EV parking spaces in front of the building? Hey, yes, we have an ADA ramp that's taking you to primary entrance, but it would be more expensive, we understand that, but it would also be a better final product if this was a universal design solution where you didn't feel like you were other moving to a ramp, and the entrance for somebody that is walking on 2 feet is the same entrance for somebody that is rolling or wheeling or using crutches to navigate that space. There are hard laws that we abide by, ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, as one example. And then we're constantly seeking examples of guidelines that aren't necessarily laws, but they are definitely ways that we can go above and beyond what the lowest common denominator design is. And oftentimes we're looking at plans that are put forth by the city, by other consultants, to give guidance to what a best case scenario for our lived environment is.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We are going to shift into a discussion about how environmental justice concerns factor into city plans and future development here in Omaha. So just to give you all in the audience some context, at our first event in this series that we had last month, we identified a few different definitions of environmental justice and environmental racism. So the two definitions of environmental justice that we learned are the federal definition, which is fair and meaningful involvement of all people in decision making. The movement definition, the environmental justice movement definition, is the ability for all people to realize their highest potential without interruption from environmental racism. We identified environmental racism as the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on people of color. And we learned that the goal of the environmental justice movement is not to redistribute environmental harms, but to abolish those harms entirely. We also identified some of the environmental harms that face Omaha residents, such as residents affected by pollution from the power plant, also by lead pollution from the Asarco plant and lead paint, poor water quality, neighborhoods that are more susceptible to extreme heat due to lack of tree cover, neighborhoods that are poorly designed for pedestrians, readiness for more extreme weather, and the connection between neighborhoods that experience environmental harms and intentional decisions such as redlining and placement of Highway 75 or the North Omaha Freeway. Working from this context, I want to ask you all some questions about how environmental justice factors into future development. So Robert, can you talk about how the Climate Action Plan is seeking or has sought fair and meaningful involvement from all residents in its design?
Sure. So there's a little bit of background, I think, that's appropriate here. First off, the creation of this plan is funded through an EPA grant that we received $1 million to go through this. When you take federal money, there's conditions. One of those conditions in this instance would be, it's referred to as Justice 40, and I'm sure many of you are very aware of that, but Justice 40 essentially says that a certain amount of the benefit from these plans has to benefit people that are residing in or living in low, moderate income areas, neighborhoods. Generally, we've been looking at it by census tract or by zip code. But that's a requirement as a part of the plan. So right off the bat, there's a necessity to engage with those communities that maybe are marginalized, that have not had the engagement that they should have had in the past, or that, and in some instances it's a community that doesn't want to or know how to engage. Just culturally, there might be a cultural difference where they don't feel comfortable with doing that, or there's any number of different things, and getting into that is it's a whole other can of worms. But so the process that we designed included engagement with these communities in a number of different ways. So there was a public survey that was put out, about 3,000 respondents, and we tracked the only demographic that we tracked, or statistic that we tracked, was zip code, so we could see where these respondents were coming from and what those answers were, right? So we weren't looking at race, we weren't looking at gender, we weren't looking at orientation, we weren't looking at income. We just wanted to place responses in the same area that we can already identify as being a low-income census tract, an area that meets our CRA, community redevelopment area criteria, areas that you'll hear them referred to as blighted. So that was one way that we were able to look at responses from specific population centers. A second way that we did was our public engagement process specifically looked at or created listening sessions. And we're actually still in the process of this, targeting or specifically wanting to speak with or in areas that included these types of populations. So we held one as an example. We held a listening session at the Urban Indian Health Coalition in South Omaha. We held several engagement efforts. One was at MCC, the MCC Fort Street campus, or Fort Omaha campus. One was at the Kroc Center down in South Omaha. So we were targeting engagement efforts in areas where we thought people could get to. Like in the case of the Urban Indian Health Coalition, it was specifically looking at a population center that does not engage. So we went to them, and that's what we tried to do there. I wrote notes on this one. And then the second thing, or the last thing that we did, is not so much a matter of engagement, but it's what do you do with that engagement. And so if you take a look at the draft plan, which is available online, we target our recommendations where appropriate, we target those recommendations and say, this is an example of one that we really want to try and get off the ground as a e-bike rebate program, right? So we want to try and incentivize people to purchase an e-bike, which we've shown can be very valuable for people to get to and from work, to commute. They're environmentally friendly, but they're not cheap. They're really nice, but they're not cheap. So we want to try and create a rebate program, an incentive program to allow people to purchase those. But in this instance, what we would do is make it income dependent. So the value of a rebate that you might qualify for would be based on your income levels. That would be tracked through basically your power bills. And this is all formative. I should note this is formative. This plan doesn't exist yet. We're working on this, but so that would allow us to provide more benefit to those that are in disadvantaged areas, basically. So that's just one example of recommendations that we're trying to tailor to or make available to a more diverse section of the population. And then another part of the recommendations I think that it's going to be critical is reaching out to those communities. It's not enough to just say, we have this program that would really benefit people that are in marginalized communities and low-income, disadvantaged communities, but they have to know about it, and that's when partnerships become really important. It's the people, the organizations, the groups that we work with, so we can say, like, a nonprofit organization that works in a Latino community can reach out and say, we have these programs related to food security, to transit or free transit programs or free workforce training programs. Those things are great, but if these organizations and these communities don't know about them, then they don't do too much good.
And that's necessary. I mean, we do live in a city that has more than 100 languages spoken, so we appreciate the intentionality behind that. Lynsey, can you talk about how the comprehensive plan will go about seeking that fair and really meaningful involvement from all of the residents in its design?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the chance to answer this question because this is, from the beginning of our team coming together, it's the one thing that we've focused on the most and had the most conversations about. I want to give you a little bit of background into the team that's working on this. So I got to join Robert's team in November. The city had actually approved for 3 planners to be hired specifically to work on writing Omaha's comprehensive plan. I absolutely love the knowledge and expertise that comes working with consultant groups. There's a lot of value that comes from it, but I think it's an important thing for the city to be forward on this plan and to say that, we're going to actually go out and listen to the community. We, 3 planners were hired, myself, my amazing coworkers, Sydney Embre and Morinike Atajoye. She joined us in June. We immediately set out to say, for us to build this plan, we have to talk to the community first. What's that going to look like and how long is this going to take? And we based all of our engagement in the International Association of Public Participation. Yes, it's a science to actually engaging the public, right? And there can be really fun ways to do it that aren't scary and don't involve like a microphone and shouting town halls where everybody gets really angry and someone gets booted out. You can actually get really rich, meaningful input from people when you sit down and talk to them, especially about things that they care about. So we just knew that we needed to foster that. So we've done a couple things. We first partnered with UNO and will continue to do so for multiple service learning classes. Dr. Josie Schaefer walked us through with 2 classes. Who are the underserved populations in the city of Omaha? Why are they underserved? And why is it important to involve them in the crafting of a comprehensive plan? We did that in January, and then we also did a summer course where we followed up on it and said, now that we know those underserved populations, talk to us about them more and tell us the best ways to get in touch with them. And really what we learned is we can't just pick one approach. It seems pretty simple, but it is clear. When we're talking about improving experiences like what you mentioned, making it so that it is normal and acceptable and the standard that when you walk into a building, people who are able and disabled are treated the same in how they need to get into and function in that building. We're only going to know about their needs if we sit down and we have conversations with the disabled community. We're only going to know about the public transit needs of octogenarians if we actually sit down and say, hey, how do you need to get to your doctor's appointment when you've got your driver's license revoked? And to then go to those communities where we know, I was actually looking at, I think you mentioned EJ40, and you were talking about life expectancy. So the EJ40 initiative, you can go on and check online. They have a really great map. You can type in the city of Omaha, Nebraska, and it'll show you parts of Omaha and the challenges that different census tracts in Omaha are faced with. And I was just looking at it today. I pulled up the census tracts that my mom and my dad, that they grew up in. And you're right, life expectancy down. The impacts of air quality are higher there. You have higher rates of families that are exposed to lead. We know, I look back, I'll tell you, I was raised hearing about the streetcars going through North Omaha, okay? My grandpa told me once a story about greasing the streetcar tracks. I don't know if it was true or not. But when I think about that, I think about a community that was built around a function of getting around within the community, and then we went in and we tore out those streetcar tracks because cars took over. But you had a whole community of people that had gotten used to moving around in one particular way. It was built to enable a flow of people in a particular way with one type of transit that made living really affordable. And then we tear it out and we say, go get cars. Well, guess what parts of Omaha have the lowest rates of vehicle ownership? Those communities that historically had your streetcars running through them. Those are also the communities that are dealing with environmental justice issues. Those are also the communities that we know we have historic disinvestment. We'll continue as a city to make bad choices that affect the lives of people if we don't go and talk to them first. If we don't get their input about what they want, talk to them about what they need. So the city is committed to doing that. We have 6 phases of community engagement for the comprehensive plan. The first one's out there right now, and it really is saying to the community, what do you value and what does Omaha need to be for you in the next 20 years? From that, we're going to develop a vision for the city of Omaha. It's going to be our guiding principles. Other cities have done this. The number that we land on depends on what you, the Omahans, tell us. But it's going to be a broad statement that'll say something like, we value safe communities where everyone can thrive and find employment that gives them meaning and purpose. You know, that's an example. If that's what Omaha tells us they want, we then build a plan that helps us get to those principles, that helps us deliver those principles. So we come to that vision with the community, only from your input. So when you answer a survey, when you see us at a booth at a community engagement event, Benson First Friday, whatever it is, we're asking you about what you want Omaha to be like. We're taking all of that input, and it's then informing the next stages of community engagement that we'll do. Next summer, we'll be doing really deep engagement, where we call it scenario planning, and it gets kind of nerdy for us, but it really says, okay, if as a city we're going to grow, how could we grow? What could it look like? So this is really where, as a city, if you say, I want to get my hands on, I want to know, I want to say I was part of crafting it, we're going to be creating workshops all over the city where you can come and do it with us. And if you don't feel informed, or maybe you say, you know what, I'm new to Omaha, I've only been here 2 years, I don't know much, or have an honest conversation with yourself, and maybe you say, I'm one of those people who never goes east of 90th or east of 72nd. We're going to give you opportunities to do bus tours. Get on public transportation with us, and we're going to show you what missing middle housing could look like in Omaha in a way that maybe you could get on board with. We can show you awesome things that are happening with building pocket prairies on the UNO's campus. Show you the wonderful things that can happen in the city that are probably already happening and maybe you didn't know about it. And then we can talk about what it takes to build more of it. So this has to be a community conversation. We'll do what we can to get you to show up, but just in case it's not enough, we're also setting up a community ambassador program. So this is, and I looked right at someone in the audience as I said this, so there are a lot of really, really amazingly passionate people in this community that need to have their voices amplified. And they may not be people who are already on a board or running a company, but they're out there doing good work every day. And they can help get people to show up. Well, guess what? You're an expert in your community, and we want to talk to you too. So 3 people from every city council district, and 3 from the extraterritorial jurisdiction. Yeah, that's a mouthful. Outside of the city limits, nominate people that you think are good community representatives that can come and partner with us in the city as we do this engagement with the community. You get people there for us. And make sure that as we're talking to them, they feel safe, they feel welcome, and you also help us. So if we say, here's everyone we've heard from, you can keep us honest and say, you haven't heard from these groups. Where's your representation from the Native population? We haven't heard it, then we know we need to go out and seek it and find it.
Now, see, I could talk about engagement. We both have big mouths. We've talked about this already, so it's okay for me to say that. We could do this all day. I am going to shift. We're going to dive back down into environmental hazards a little bit. Robert, are there any recommendations in the upcoming climate action plan that seek to abolish environmental hazards currently faced by us as Omaha residents?
Yes, all of them. Mm-hmm. I struggle with the word abolish. I feel like it sets a connotation that we are forcing somebody to do something that they don't want to do. And what we've seen in our engagement efforts is that people are really, they are engaged by this, and they want to be involved. They want to make better choices, and they want to have the ability to do that. So rather than to abolish something, like I think the one that came up a few years back was single-use plastics or plastic bags. Oh, yeah. The mayor had the bill on her desk. They were gonna ban plastic bags from the city of Omaha, and she ended up not passing that or not signing that. And from my perspective, I sympathize with what Mayor Stothert was doing at the time, because all it would do is inflame controversy and not result in a reduction in bags, because we've got a very large community around the city of Omaha where they weren't gonna ban plastic bags, and it was going to create more disenfranchisement from people that we really need to engage. And so I sympathized with that. But if we were to be in a position to say, reusable canvas bags, we can provide you with those for free, or these businesses will actually give you a discount if you were to utilize these bags. You get 10 cents, 25 cents off for each bag that you use. Without getting too far into the weeds on this, that's just an example of a way that we can work towards the goals without forcing people to make choices they don't want to make, and work with the people that do want to make those choices.
Absolutely.
Can I jump in there a little bit?
Please.
As we know now, I watch too much television. one of my favorite shows, timeless show, is The West Wing. And one of my favorite quotes from The West Wing, fictional president Jed Bartlett, if you want to go far, go alone. Or if you want to go far, go together. If you want to go fast, go alone. The trouble is we have to go far fast. And the same example of plastic bags and the potential disenfranchisement of a huge section of the populace by making a decision on behalf of the masses, I think it goes back to a conversation that the three of us were having at least a week ago, which is really around consensus. And the challenge with any planning effort is we seek community engagement and involvement so that we can find a more authentic representation of consensus, but we don't always begin that conversation by defining what consensus is, because a lot of people walk into the room and they're like, cool, you agree with me? Great, consensus. And that is completely wrong. Consensus is, as we try to define what success is for everybody that's a part of this conversation, what is the middle ground that all of us can live with? What can we all tolerate as we seek that vision of success? And I think one of the biggest challenges with planning efforts as we become more successful as an enterprise, and when I say enterprise, I mean like the city, our community, we're able to live longer. We are able to improve the quality of life for many of us. And when we do so, I think it gets harder and harder to agree on what success looks like. Maybe that's my pessimistic take on where we are right now, or maybe that's optimistic. I don't know. But having 400,000 odd people say, cool, this singular vision is what we're all striving for, now we can move forward, is like an impossible task. And we give that impossible task to the planning department, and we're like, hey, where's that document at?
Here.
Maybe, Lynsey, you can speak to, when it comes to the comprehensive plan, any recommendations you might have in there around environmental hazards.
Yeah. So I've been really clear, and I'll still be saying this thing 2 years from now. I am not writing the plan right now. It's not okay for me to say that I know what we should do, especially because it's, to me, putting the cart before the horse. We're engaging the community to have those conversations. There are things that can be done. Lincoln, Lancaster County did their comprehensive plan. One of the things that they've been able to do is remove mandatory parking minimums. What does that mean for you and your community? People who show up to city council meetings are going to say, you're taking my parking away, and I hate it. But what it also means is less impervious surfaces covering your city, right? That means so many things for stormwater management, for water quality, and never mind the fact that parking lots get in the way of pedestrian activity, right? Like, there's just so many reasons that just drive through your city, drive past a Walgreens, look at how many cars are parked, and look at how many stalls are empty. We're requiring that. So cities can undo that if there's a will.
We should also note that those parking lots take up space that could be used for housing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So these are the types of things that plans can deliver. What the 1997 comprehensive plan did is it came together with a committee of 50 people that were appointed by the mayor at the time that worked with the planning department to create it. not throwing shade on what they did. It was appropriate and kind of like at the height of planning at the time. That was the approach that you would take. But it was putting a lot of decisions about policies, programs, and actions that the city can take into a small, into the hands of a few people. Apart from just the community engagement, we're going to have technical committees that are helping us write the plan that are focused on 8 different elements in the city, the natural systems being one of them. And it's city employees as well as experts in the fields that are going to be on that committee with us, bringing ideas to the forefront of what should go in our plan. So really, to me, the question isn't, is the plan going to have it? It's more of a question back to the community of what do you want in there. There are a lot of ideas. We can look at what other cities have done as well. But yeah, we can do big things with this plan, big things.
And people have the opportunity to give their input. 100%. So, Kene, let's keep this conversation going. And what role do urban designers play when it comes to, for lack of better words, abolishing environmental hazards within cities, specifically Omaha?
I'll jump back to a thing that a few of us have touched on. Urban heat island effect is one of the lowest hanging fruit to talk about. We know that, and this is simplifying it as much as possibly can be done, concrete is expensive and it also kills us. It is hot. Trees reduce the heat. It sounds crazy when you speak of it in such simple terms, but the more trees we plant, the healthier a community is. And yes, we can be strategic about the types of vegetation we're introducing to the space, but really simply, spaces where you don't have respite, spaces where the heat index is increased by 15, 20 degrees, those are spaces where people, go figure, are more likely to succumb to heat stroke. So that is one very straightforward example. Other examples of the ways that we mitigate risk of bodily injury and bodily harm, traffic calming techniques that we use, where I will admit, there's no police officers in the room, right? All right, I'll take that giggling as a no. I will admit that if I were to speed, it would be because I know that the road speed that is dictated is 5, 10, 15 miles below the design speed that the engineer had to design for. But I also know that if I am moving through a space that has a boulevard or like an alley of trees on either side, inherently I want to move slower through that space because I'm not sure what's coming around the corner. If the standard drive lane is 12 feet, it doesn't need to be 12 feet. Your car's not 12 feet wide. If that's reduced to 11, 10 feet, then I am driving slower. Me driving slower and like the delta of 10 miles per hour, it's a shallow angle when your foot is on the pedal, but when it comes to impact speeds, when somebody is unfortunately comes in contact with a vehicle, that's the difference between a fracture or death. So these subtle shifts that we've learned over the last number of decades, unfortunately through trial and error, impact the way that we design our communities and the expectations that we have for our built environment.
Okay. So these questions are really open to anyone. So any of you, please feel free to just jump in and answer. Let's talk about trends. Can you talk about any trends you may have seen in the urban design work that seeks to address future and or even past environmental racism?
I'll talk about a couple that come to mind because I think that there's also a connection with Omaha as well. There's a lot of cities that, And I put this out there because I am aware that Omaha makes things happen when there's financial sense behind it, right? When you can make it pencil out on paper, right? That's when we can make things happen. A lot of communities have done the Railways to Trails project, where you're converting old, unused railways, which, when you think about the communities that typically are going to have housing or businesses around there, they're going to be your underprivileged populations, converting those unused railways into public trails. So you've got examples like New York City, where they have the High Line, right, where it's an elevated surface. It used to run the trains up top, and it's a beautiful natural experience in the middle of the city. We've got our North Omaha Trail that is going to continue to get expanded. But things like that, we have an opportunity to take what served a function but provided a lot of harm to surrounding communities and turn it into something really good and useful. But what we also have to make sure that we're protecting along with it is these trends can be really great, but if they start to impact people in a way where those folks are now being moved out of their communities because, property values go up when you've got these wonderful amenities around your home. Terms like gentrification or otherwise displacement, you can see that happen. So we have to think really smart as a community, I think, about these trends and make sure that if it brings value to Omaha, great. But let's keep equity at the forefront of those decisions so that we make sure that we're implementing it for the right reasons and in the right communities and in the right way, and that they also want it.
I'm glad you used the word value, because that's something that I've been grappling with for a minute. In this conversation and outside of this conversation, because a lot of the decisions that we make, for example, the Rails to Trails initiative that you were just talking about, phenomenal initiative, big fan. Some of the projects that we're working on now are exactly that, so keep them coming. But at the same time, part of the reason why we love those initiatives are because they are cheaper than the alternative, which is a brand new system. The great thing about taking an old railway is, cool, we already graded the earth so that a train could move seamlessly through this space. The horizontal alignment and the vertical alignment is already conducive to riding a bike. So if we take the rail out and we put in a 10-foot wide trail, easy. What I don't love about a straightforward solution like that, and don't get me wrong, I do love a straightforward solution like that. I don't love the way that we apply this is cheaper to make, so it's the right decision, as our benchmark for logic in this scenario. And going back to the point about gentrification, I think it's a really good one. And since school, I've been trying to think through what the solution is. And the only thing that I've learned is the solution isn't siloed to landscape architects and urban designers or to developers alone or to planners alone. It does require thought and government and smart design, but I've also seen the pitfalls of when a single group tries to take on the burden of the right solution alone, and that just makes more problematic issues. We talked about the example years back when I was coming up through school, just out of school. There was an initiative that was presented in national conferences of just green enough, and that skeptical look is exactly the right look. Effectively, what people were trying to do was say, okay, we know that property values will increase if we make something that's really nice. So let's make something that's just nice enough for this community. And I like to approach life from the perspective of everyone's right, they just don't know that they're all right yet. And I see where their heart was. I see where their mind was. I see where like the logical steps were in trying to like find a solution that doesn't move Matthew and Martha out of the home that they've lived in for 20 years. But I don't know, anytime you say just blank enough, I'm like, problems.
All right, I've got three trends. The first would be urban agriculture, growing your own food. Chickens are a great example of one of those things that just seems to be really niche and really popular and continues to gain in popularity. But the city of Omaha just recently passed an urban agricultural ordinance that would allow for growing of your own crops for your own purposes, and actually some limited commercial applications as well on your own residentially zoned properties for your own use. And I think that codifying that and saying this is a right that all the citizens of Omaha have, that's one big one, and one that we've seen around the country. The second one would be, and this is because I was the city's floodplain manager for 7 years, and I worked through the tornado, I worked through the flooding in 2019, the other flooding events that happened this spring and summer. There is, for a long time, talk about history, for a long time, the most affordable housing, the poorer populations lived in floodplains because that's where the land was cheap and they could build cheap housing, and then those disadvantaged communities could then move into that housing. And one great example of this would be back when I was at the University of Iowa in Cedar Rapids. There was a bad flood in 2008 and destroyed huge blocks of neighborhood in Cedar Rapids. Historically, they were like Czech and Eastern European neighborhoods, because that was the poor population that moved into the city at that time. And but they, the diversity had blossomed over time, but those neighborhoods were wiped out. It was something like 10,000 homes were gone, and they had to figure out what to do. All of that housing was gone. The trend now is we're not building in floodplains anymore, and in fact, what you'll see is that there was an article in the Herald, I think, that Iowa the insurance companies are no longer covering homeowners in Iowa because of bad practices exactly like that. Florida, same thing is happening. Insurance companies are not covering these homes because of the inherent danger of living in Florida, whether it be storms or just Florida stuff. But so that's the second trend. The third one is I'm just going to say this. I'm not referring to any particular project here in Omaha, but I will say that there is a trend in removing large interstate and highway systems from urban areas. That's all I'll say.
Okay. Well, that being said, let's talk about trends in urban design. So trends in urban design like low impact development that take into account extreme heat and or extreme weather in general when developing multimodal transportation routes. Any trends there?
I'll start.
Double Dutch. Who's going to jump in first?
So as we're thinking about like multimodal corridors, one of the things that I appreciate that Omaha's this is really an initiative of, I think, more citizens than it is. The conversation is shifting from seeing transit outside of single vehicles and outside of, all right, bluntly, we're seeing trails as transit, and I'm very excited about that. For the longest time, we've thought of anything that's not driving as a form of recreation, and that's just not the case. When you go up 9 hours and you're in the Forks in Winnipeg, how do you get from one part of town to the other part of town in the winter? Put your ice skates on and you get on the river. that is phenomenal. In other parts of the world, you will literally use your water body as a mechanism to commute from home to work. We have opportunities to be creative about the ways that we move around the city, and I think that we're starting to be more open to those. The streetcar being one of those mechanisms where I think that some of the challenge that people have when thinking about the streetcar is they're seeing the streetcar as 100% mobility and transit, and that's not the full story. Like the streetcar is an economic driver, and we have the BRT system as a people mover, if you will. The challenge is when we get into the minutia of seeing a solution as the solution for the entire city, where part of the reason why I was really excited by the possibility of dreaming in the next phase of the comprehensive plan is I and others around the city are really excited about thinking through what a mass system for Omaha could look like. So mobility as service, where, yes, there is a speed transit option, whether that be BRT or some type of unfeasible, I know, rail scenario. Nesting that with an expanded bus network, and then also with the streetcar along with trails, thinking about the scooters in a way that feasibly works for everybody, and expanding the access routes that people are able to safely use, so that we're not saying, cool, a new city, here are 100 scooters which are now required by law to be on the same streets, and it's fine because we've written into the agreement when you are signing up for the app that you'll be wearing a helmet as you use this. I love that we have these mechanisms to get around the city, but we also haven't done a great job of keeping up with the infrastructure to accommodate safe transit throughout. So summarizing all of that, glass half full on scooters and bikes and skateboards and rail and buses and transit, but also expanding the infrastructure to accommodate all of those more seamlessly.
I'll add that I think the number might be off, but it's something like over 30% of greenhouse gas emissions that occur in the city of Omaha are occurring based on internal combustion engines that are utilized in transportation. So when he talks about these alternative forms of transit, it's also critical, potentially the most critical climate-related action that we can look at is reducing those vehicle miles traveled with internal combustion engines. And it's all interrelated. It's not just about people having mobility and access. It's about, this is where the climate action also comes into play.
And I will say I am from a car family. I grew up going to drag races, smelling nitrous come out of engines. I have a family that we live and die cars, okay? This is a challenge for me even to work my way through this. The community survey that we have open now until the end of the month, we've gotten over 2,000 responses, and as we're looking at survey responses, there's 4 themes that are emerging. Public transportation, expanding public transportation, and this is for people 50 and over, is who we're primarily hearing it from. And it's an environmental issue. We all know this, but let's also talk about it being an equity issue. So it's personal to me. I grew up in North Omaha, and I was employed at PayPal in La Vista. There's no public transit that gets you out there. There are numerous people in the city of Omaha whose lives and families have been improved just from working in that company because of the opportunities it gave them, the chance to own stock in a multinational company, that numerous people were not given the opportunity to have that form of entry-level employment because they couldn't get there. I mapped what it would take for me to take a bus from my old home on 39th in Kansas to get out to PayPal in La Vista using all of the bus routes, and it was going to take me an hour and 49 minutes to get there, making 3 to 4 exchanges. And that's if the bus gets you there on time. And guess what PayPal did? They had employment policies that said if you're late 3 times, you're fired. So it's an environmental issue, it's an equity issue. Public transportation isn't just about how do I get from, like you said, it's not just recreation. It's my life, it's my livelihood, and we have to offer more ways to do it. My mom asked me the other day, how are you going to fit a streetcar on the road with everything else? It's a valid question. It's a good question. Watch us do it. It's going to be great.
Go ahead.
Well, just 2 quick things to the question of like, how do you fit a streetcar in? I appreciate that like we have so many lanes on both Dodge and also like I-80 and 680 and every other 80 that we have. The thing that other communities have done and we are able to learn from their experiments, let's say, is that we always think, okay, let me add a lane and that'll reduce like traffic time. And it does for like a couple weeks, a couple months maybe. And then it goes back to the loads that you were experiencing previously. So we have mechanisms to get to downtown and to Midtown and also to Capital District, giving up that one lane partially, we're going to be fine. And then the second thing I was going to say, you all made the mistake by giving me a mic. Shouldn't have done that.
Alex, where's the hook? I'm just kidding.
Even though we don't have an architect on stage, I'll wear the hat for a moment just to note, as we're talking about development, low impact development, the most sustainable decision that we can make as it pertains to building and all of the infrastructure that we're building, whether it be roads, trails, actual physical buildings, 3 stories, it's the most sustainable thing, the most sustainable building you can make is the one that already exists. The fact that we have the opportunity, I'm a glass half full person, we have the opportunity to learn from our past mistakes. We will never have another Jobbers Canyon. We can't immediately think, what can I put in that spot where that building is now, by only imagining tearing that down and rebuilding. Exactly. Whoever said repurposing, 10 points to Gryffindor. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
From the work that we're doing from that perspective, I will also say that that those the existing building, from a redevelopment perspective, it's always cheaper to redevelop than to develop new. First of all, we don't have the land to do it. Second of all, where is all of this existing housing stock? Where is it located at? It's in East Omaha. It's in the same neighborhoods as these disadvantaged communities, these areas that need better representation. So there's something to be said about that.
Okay. So, one final question for each of you. Robert, how can everyday residents get involved in the next phases of the climate action plan to really help, affect the design of the plan?
Sure. So we are at a point now, I went through the timeline earlier. We are at a point right now where we're really close to having a final draft of that plan, and that draft is going to be going to the planning board and city council for adoption. So right now, as the weather gets colder, there's not a lot of really good opportunities for engagement and for residents and citizens to affect the details and recommendations of the plan. I apologize, but this speaker series just kind of happened in that way and in that time. Hopefully, if you guys are aware of the plan, you've had the opportunity to become engaged previously. But what that means, though, is that we're moving into implementation, which is, again, as I kind of pointed out at the beginning of this, is the critical component of this. So we will have implementation, or we will have a process by which residents can become involved in implementation. But the thing to remember is that this plan is absolutely massive, and it gets into literally every corner. Is it transportation, or is it how you're heating and cooling your buildings, or is it the green space? Is it urban? Is it food security? Is it your health and welfare? It's all of those things, and it's also water quality, and it's also air quality, and it's also flooding, and all resilience and being able to respond to natural disasters. Like all of these little things, these bits and pieces of our everyday lives, there's this environmental impact that's occurring all the time with them. And so what you want to be engaged in is going to be up to you, because it will literally be, you will be able to be engaged in any aspect of your life that you can think of. And so it's going to be up to you. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. And then Lynsey, how will neighborhood organizers be able to use the process of the comprehensive plan design to support their work at the neighborhood level around environmental harms?
There are going to be any number of ways. One of the things that we're thinking about now as we look forward to implementation is thinking about the roles that all of us play in the community. And depending upon what role or maybe what hat I'm wearing, there are different things that I can do. As Robert mentioned, the climate action plan alone is huge. The amount of things that can be delivered through that, it's not going to come from just the city or just one organization or just one neighborhood. So knowing what you can do, whether you're ready to put a lot of effort into it or just a little bit, we need to craft our plan in a way that you can see yourself in it. So for example, I keep mentioning UNO, but it's great for us to have a university so central to our city that's really interested in investing in it and continuing to educate us. And one of the recommendations of the Climate Action Plan is to reduce turf grass coverage. And there's a sustainability class at UNO that has taken it upon themselves. They say, okay, well, we can do that. Where can we do it on UNO? And they've been putting in pocket prairies. And just doing that one thing is targeting, 4 or 5 different goals of the Climate Action Plan. Never mind the fact that you're educating and hopefully inspiring future populations.
You all can do that too, by the way. You can convert your yards to pocket prairie if you want.
Maybe what you do is you say, I'm tiptoeing into this and let me see what a rain barrel does. Putting in a rain garden. Tackling your HOA. Having conversations with your HOA. Why do you ban me from doing these things with my yard? Here's how they'd be beneficial to the community. Here's why the city allows it. Work to change minds in your neighborhood if you can. And part of what we need to do is make sure that we're supplying you with the information that you need to do that. What the comprehensive plan can and should deliver for us, I mentioned, is every 5 years we need to go back and we say, do we need to change? Do we need to adjust? I'll give you an example. The city of Memphis, Tennessee implemented their comprehensive plan. How are they similar to the city of Omaha? In a couple of ways. Omaha grew through annexation. Those of you who've been in Omaha long enough have seen it happen where, we build little suburbs and we annex little towns. South Omaha, Florence, Millard, Elkhorn, we see you. We grew through annexation. So did Memphis. And doing that is not always sustainable, especially in the way that we have developed with low density development farther out west. And what they did is they said, we, with our comprehensive plan, are going to talk about areas of change for our city. There are some parts of our city that are A-okay, that we don't really need to mess with. There are other parts of our city where we have core fundamental issues from infrastructure on that need to get tackled, and that's where we want our priority focus to go. These are things we can do. And from an approach like that, we, again, hope to build this plan in such a way that, again, you can see yourself in it and you say, well, what are the steps I can take? Sometimes it is a bit of an experiment, right? But willing people to get out there and try something new. Don't put it all on the city. Don't put it all on a nonprofit. Take what you can too.
Okay, and then Kene, same thing for you. How can neighborhood organizers work with urban designers to really help develop solutions to the environmental harms that we've encountered?
Sometimes the answer to that deals with your capacity as a client of ours, and then sometimes the community members are brought in through expertise and lived experience, whether that be engagement events, whether that be being asked to be a stakeholder in a committee for a dedicated project. I know that we've harped on this quite a bit, but it's pretty substantive, the input and the impact that we have through these types of initiatives, because it guides the outcome. I think that there are some planners that walk into a project and they have an idea of what the solution is going to be when they take on the project. None of those people are on this stage and none of those people are in this room. If I could simplify the recommendation to community members, all of us, it would be to focus on process more than product. Sometimes we look at a planning product, we look at the finished thing, and we start picking apart, okay, what are the things that I agree with, or what are the things that I challenge and question, and the most impact that you have in any process is at the beginning, and when you're looking at the product, it's already too late. As we think about the process specifically, there are usually touch points throughout that process where we're asking for feedback, we're asking for help, we're asking for perspective, and all of those pieces of input are data points. Somebody once described the difference between data and information being, data is all the ones and zeros that tell you what the value actually is. That value is what information is. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is create an informed product. We can't put value to it of whether it's going to be good, bad, or otherwise. All we can do is try and represent communal truth in this final product. So the biggest recommendation that I can give is anytime you hear somebody mention that there is a plan, there's a study, there's a design, there's a project, they, especially if they are like part of the initiative, they want to talk more about it. All of us always want to talk more about it. Take them up on that.
I appreciate that. So, first of all, let's give the panel a round of applause. I told you we had a squad up here. Thank you so much. That's all the questions we have time for right now. We're going to open it up to the audience. So I am going to pass the microphone to Alex, and we're going to open it up. You can just, if you have a question for anyone on our panel here, please just come down if you are able to where Alex is. If you are not, wave your hand. We will make sure that you bring you the microphone. So yeah, come on down with your questions, please.
Hello, my name is Paulette. I live downtown Omaha in the Highline building, which is right across from Jocelyn Art Museum. One of the reasons I live there is because I don't own a car, because I have a reason why I can't drive. There aren't many places in Omaha where someone can get around and live a full life without having a car. Is there anything that is in the plans to make more transit-oriented neighborhoods that are better connected? Like I know Dundee is an area that has pretty good connections with the orbit going through there. But if you live west of 72nd, it's really hard to get a bus anywhere. And the subway, or not the subway, the streetcar only goes this far, and it doesn't go to here. So I had to get a ride here to this event today, or plan a bus route that would take 45 minutes from where I live. So I know it's transit-oriented problems in a city like Omaha where cars are the thing. But I just want to put it on the table. There are a lot of people like me who are retired people or people with certain disabilities where they can't drive or they can't afford a car because cars are expensive, that just really need options on getting someplace. For example, I would like to be able to get down to Lincoln. There's no quick and easy way to get to Lincoln without a car. Get to the airport. I can call Uber, which is really great, but there are other people who live farther away where Uber drive would be $40 or something to get to the airport. There should be, like from Elkhorn to the airport, there should be really simple ways to do that kind of thing. I used to live in Washington, D.C., so that's kind of the mindset that I'm working with. And I know Omaha doesn't have the density that a city like that does, but I wish it did. I wish we had a better, denser, user-friendly transportation network so that people who don't have cars don't feel like they have to spend $5,000 a year to have a car so that they can get around the city. Thank you.
I'll start with that. Number one, thank you for that question. You touched on some of the challenges that the community faces, specifically around density, with making some of these solutions. I will give, even though they are continuing to advance this work, MAPA and Metro both, I will give props to the full staff as they try to work through solutions of expanding our transit network. You specifically asked, you started the question by asking about plans that talk about expansion of opportunities for getting around the community. There is an initiative through specifically MAPA, I believe also partnering with Metro and bringing in community bike advocates specifically. It's a trail project, I'm giving you a heads up. I love talking about trails. And this project was titled Neighborhood Expanded Access to Trails. Pretty neat name. I didn't come up with that name. I love it though. So the NEAT initiative effectively looked at neighborhoods throughout the Omaha Metro and through a few lenses of infrastructure, equity, and then you can dive into like how we defined equity, but really boiling down access to the trail network so that from a neighborhood you don't have to have a car to get from point A to point Z, and the lowest hanging fruit to do that was by connecting these siloed neighborhoods to the trail network so that they had more access to the remainder of the community. That is an initiative that had a phase one, which prioritized a slate of, I should remember the exact number, but it was at least a half dozen like easy win projects, because this goes back to the conversation around value and us being able to more easily fund more projects by noting, hey, this costs less than this other idea we have. Maybe not the metric that we want to use moving forward when we think about our idyllic community, but it's the metric that we have now as we are framed with the realities of funding and billing cycles. But nod to MAPA and Metro, and then nod to initiatives like NEAT, which, though it is an additional plan that is not in either of these plans, it goes back to the point very early on of, we have so many plans. We have so many plans. And it's not lost on us that there are dozens on dozens on dozens of these, but there's also a need for an expanded transit system that accommodates all of the people that make up Omaha. And there's also a need for affordable housing and for climate action and for a revamping of our comprehensive plan, which really will pull from all of these initiatives. So I'll turn it.
I'll say more concrete terms. Are you able to utilize Orbit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have nothing but good things to say about the bus
I love Orbit.
drivers and the buses.
I'll take my girls. When Bud Crawford won, we took the Orbit down from West Roads down to downtown so we could watch the parade. That was great. I will say that there is an expansion of the Orbit route in the design phase, which Kene will tell you does in the design phase means we're working on it. But there's an expansion of the Orbit route that's kind of conceptualized. You'll find that in the Metro Next plan. That's I think they want to run it on 24th would be the first iteration of that expansion. Conceptually they also want to expand it onto 72nd, but there's some challenges there. 72nd is really turning into one of those corridors where space is just not there anymore, and you really do have a question of where are we going to put this thing, and how do you design the stops? Where do you put the stops? There's challenges to that one, but that's not to say it's impossible. It's just, it takes time. But there are expansions of the transit system that are in the works. It's a matter of demonstrating the will and that a capacity can be maintained, that these things will be used. That's always the thing about transit is, oh, nobody's on Orbit. Nobody's riding that. Well, that's just garbage.
Yeah.
And I drive down Dodge every single day, and I see those Orbit buses filled every single day. So I can say from personal experience, it's just not true. Our boss has this fantastic map, by the way, I wanted to say this earlier, has this fantastic map in his office that showed all of the old streetcar routes. And if you don't know that Omaha was a streetcar community, my God, we must have had probably 25, 30 routes in this city. They went everywhere. They went all the way out into Benson. They went all the way out into Keystone, south into Millard. And it was fantastic. So you want to talk about a realistic initiative that brings back some of that old Omaha feel. Streetcars are where it's at. That's Omaha heritage right there.
And I would add to everything you guys said and say from the comprehensive plan standpoint, as much as I say that we're not writing the plan before it's been written, I can say that there are goals that we know that we have to accomplish so that we can hit equity, especially for disadvantaged populations, okay? So infrastructure for people to get around is not just cars. That has to be written into our plan. So that we know investing in people moving in any way that they need to move, whether you're 8 or 80, you can do it, is a right. One of the reasons I didn't say this at the very beginning, but that we're writing the comp plan now is because if the city of Omaha continues to grow in the way that it has, building developments and houses in the way that it has, we are going to run out of land by 2050. We can't go beyond Douglas County boundaries. We can't build over the Elkhorn Ridge. That's a floodplain, and it's incredibly expensive to do so. For a city that is having challenges housing its people, you can't keep building houses the way that we have. The greenest communities are denser communities where people, if you choose to, can get around without a car. So the urban core is a plan that has been developed and that continues to get focused and will be looked at in the comprehensive plan, which really says in your downtown, midtown area, this is the core of our city. It has to be a heartbeat that is strong, and you've got to fill it with people, and you've got to help them get around. So I fully envision the plan being something that will continue to support that. But I will say, a part that you all play is when these things come in front of City Council, the people who are talking to the City Council representatives are not the people who need to take the bus, because they're not getting there at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. So you need to speak for them, show up for them, contact all of your City Council people. Be their voice when they can't have a voice. We can do it from inside as much as we can, but they listen to you. So you guys got to be there as well.
Wonderful. Unfortunately, we never know how deep we dive into these answers. No, with questions from the audience. I think we have time for one more question.
I'm going to try to make a comment. First off, I'd like to thank One Omaha and the participants and the guests. Sorry I haven't been here, but I spent the last 3.5 weeks in Portland, which is way different than here. And I look at the similarities and I look at the differences. And your job as planners is so tough. A house that's $800,000 in one of the modest suburbs, the lot sizes are immensely small. They do have transit, but with the transits, they have other problems. It's just so complex. And I appreciate your input. The one question I had, I want to follow up on this lady. I really feel, and you know where I stand on this. I was interviewed by the TV about 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, and there is no transit stop at the airport. It is an intermittent route, so this lady nor anyone else has reliable transportation to the airport. I live in that facility. I used to work there. It's also illegal to bike or walk to our airport. We're spending $950 million to access our airport, and what we support is parking garages and car structure. Poor people can't afford Uber or cars. Now, I can walk to the terminal from my house in 16 minutes. But when I was an employee there, I got stopped by the airport police for violating by walking and biking. And I was badged for that. And they told me if they caught me, they were going to suspend my badge. Now, I've addressed that. I was interviewed because of your predecessor. Did a tweet or something. I don't know what she did. But then she calls me and she says, will you interview? And I'm really pro-Omaha. I'm an Omaha guy. I'm also a car guy. But I'm for walking and biking, so I'm a paradox. I grew up around cars. My whole family's car-based. It's so tough, the job that we're doing, and we're not engaged with the planning at the airport. We were not engaged in my neighborhood plan. We were not engaged with the business park plan, which plans on bulldozing 160 acres of low-income housing in my neighborhood. Now we're being engaged, but we're at the implementation phase. So I really appreciate this. But I think my question is, are we able to have those communications with the Omaha Airport Authority so this lady can have some kind of resolution? Because without them, Metro doesn't have a choice. But we're spending almost $1 billion and there's no transit stop plan. Mm-hmm. That to me is insane. And we're building an international airport for people, hopefully, to travel how they used to be, or what they're used to, in other countries. And we're not that. So how do we implement that?
Thank you for this question. And if One Omaha were to host a whole other topic on how we can do systems thinking in comprehensive planning and engage as a city and a region, I would love to continue that conversation. But that's an excellent point. Omaha exists in a state, a metropolitan area. A good example is when the new high schools were being built in Omaha, getting us to the point that we could have public trails going through and around the schools. That doesn't happen if we're not speaking to the school system, right? We were at the point where just accessing the schools through trails for students and other community members is not going to happen because we weren't all talking about the fact that we exist in the same space. So I will answer very briefly, part of our plan for the comprehensive plan is stacking our incredible amount of committees with people that represent these organizations so that they know what we're doing, why we're doing it, what are your plans, and where do your plans support us, and where are we diverging, and where do we need to come together? And that's a lesson that we've learned, I think, from trying to do these things in isolation. We know that these are conversations we have to have. Come talk to me again in 3 years, and we'll see if we did it right.
I will add, the proposals do exist. I don't have as much information or data on this as I did with, say, the orbit routes, but the proposals do exist. The intent is there. I can't provide you more specific information because I just don't have it or don't know it, but you're not the only one that has considered this, and it is something that has been, that the priority of that action has gone up since the airport has started their big remodeling project. That's what I can tell you.
Wonderful. Well, that is unfortunately all the questions we have time for right now. I really do want to thank everyone who came out tonight. We really do appreciate you taking just time out of your day. You could have been anywhere else besides here at the Benson Theater with One Omaha, but you chose to come here tonight. We are very grateful. It's a great opportunity for us to all come out, just have really great discussion about what are really just very important issues. Alex and I talk about how we can continue these conversations all the time because it just leaves so much with us, and we just leave with so many questions. So let's go ahead and give our panelists, our speakers, another round of applause, please. So,
could I make one more quick, tiny little plug, really, really quickly?
absolutely.
There's the question about how we all engage, and just as a reminder, it's an election year. The easiest way to engage is by voting. That is a way that helps all of us do what we need to do. So please advocate down ballot as well as top of ballot.
We are definitely fans of civic engagement at One Omaha, and I do want to recognize one of our local elected officials, Bree Fool, who was in the audience, and an Omaha Public Schools board member. Local politics matter, y'all, and school board is also where it's at as well. So if you would like to access follow-up resources or a video of tonight's conversation, or even the one that we had last month, you'll be able to find all of that information on our website, which is oneomaha.org. One is spelled out. If you want to receive updates for when our website is updated with the video and resources, just make sure you register for tonight's event, if you haven't already, or a future event, and we'll update you when those resources are available. So thank you again to Benson Theater and for all of you for coming out. Have a wonderful evening.